Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to review with you the topics for your exam and what we're going to be doing next week and the next one. First, exercise 4 is going to be open today. You have homework. Exercise 4 is simple. Again, only one more diagram, sequence diagrams. Sequence diagrams, when you have two classes or even one class, what you have inside, methods. You have an object, you have a method, that method is calling another method, and maybe this other method returns something or call another one. The sequence diagrams is going to show the sequence of the methods calling one to the other in a particular time of the execution of the program. So if you want to map the diagram with your knowledge of programming, is all about methods. As usual, I am sharing with you some videos. Check the videos. You are going to do an exercise. Your exercise, submit some diagrams. Due date, as usual, next week, Wednesday. Good? That is one. Second, this week also, you have a quiz, the quiz 2. Quiz 2. Quiz 2 is all about diagrams. Which diagrams? All of them. Use cases, class diagrams, state machine diagrams, activity diagrams. The goal for the quiz, 10 questions, 30 minutes. Obviously, it's part of your grade, but my goal is the quiz is kind of your preparation for the exam. You can take the quiz and maybe some questions from the quiz are going to be also in the exam. You can have an idea about your preparation regarding the diagrams for the exam. The quiz, open today, also is due next week, Wednesday. Wednesday. So exercise and quiz. This is your homework for this week. Also, this week, today, you're going to have a link like this, sample exam. It's not an exam, it's just one question. And I think the question is, what's your name or how are you today? The only goal for this link is for you to test the proctoring software that we're going to use next week for the exam. Finally, we're going to be using the lockdown browser. So the only goal for the sample exam link is for you to review that your system have everything that you need in order to run the lockdown browser. There is one question here, is 0 points. You can enter to the link as many times as you want. Again, used for you to review the lockdown browser. The lockdown browser, maybe the most important thing that you need to check is your camera. You need to have a camera. If you do not have the camera, the software is not going to allow you to continue. So if for any reason the camera in your computer is not configured or not detected by the browser, you're going to have issues. So please, as soon as possible, today, tomorrow, check this. I am sure that you can be doing this one or this one next week, Wednesday. It is fine as soon as you submit before the due date. But this thing, please, as soon as you can review. So if you need to go and ask a friend to borrow a camera or a computer with a camera, you can do it. Do not do this the same day that the exam. You could have problems. Anyway, these 3 things, your homework. Good? Okay. Now, the exam. I want to show you today some questions, some examples of the format of the exam and so on. That is going to be the last part of the lecture today. But just to be sure that you have the information. Next week, your exam. Next week, we do not have a lecture. Next week, during the time of the lecture, 9 to 10:30, you do not use Zoom next week. Next week at 9 a.m., you go open the lockdown browser and you can start with your exam. The exam You can finish in 16 minutes. You can finish in 1 hour. And you have these 15 extra minutes to do the process with the lockdown browser. The lockdown browser is going to ask you for an ID, it's going to take your picture, it's going to ask you to scan your room, etc. That process hopefully can be done in 15 minutes, so you can have 1 hour to go and do your exam. Again, the exam is open only during the time of the lecture. So 10:15, exam is done. Only 9 to 10:15, you can take the exam next week. No lecture. I am not going to be here in Zoom. Anything that you need before the exam, or maybe when you finish the exam, you can send me an email. Good. Now, after the exam, next week, you have homework. Remember, one day we meet during the lecture. Next week is going to be the time for the exam, but also you have homework always. Well, next week you have homework. Next week, your homework is assignment 1. Assignment 1 is going to open on Canvas after the exam. So when the exam closes, you're going to have links, and that link is going to be assignment 1. The assignment 1 is basically an exercise using GitHub. If you have used GitHub before, just show me that you have used before, follow the steps, don't. If you have not used GitHub, never. If you do not know what I am talking about regarding GitHub, well, there is some instructions there, a video that you can review and complete your assignment. GitHub is an assignment as any other. Due date October 7, which is or should be Wednesday, but in 2 weeks. And we are going to come back to the lectures. The next lecture is going to be October 8. So lecture today, next week the exam, no lecture. The next week we are come back to the format of the lectures on Zoom. That is more or less our schedule for the next week and the next one. The most important thing, put in your calendar, make a note, this assignment. It's very, very common that you could think, I am done with the exam, no lecture until the next week, I do nothing. And a lot of people miss the assignment. And remember, no late submissions. Put a note that you're going to have homework after the exam next week. Yeah, as usual, quizzes, assignments, exercises, and so on. Due date, midnight, Wednesday. Good? Yeah. Okay, so that is the schedule. Now, I need to ask you, I have received some emails from you. I am sure that probably there are going to be more this week. Please, if you send an email to me or to the TA, be sure to mention the class. The TAs, some of them are helping me with more than one class. So if you send an email like, I have a question about my assignment 1, myself or the TAs are going to ask like, okay, assignment 1 and who you are, which class are you taking, what is this? So in order to make the process a little bit faster, it's like you can tell me who you are, which class are you taking, like, okay, 360, good. But as you know, 360, we have 2 sections. You are here one day and there are another section that is Tuesdays. So just mention the date that you take the lecture. I am taking your class 360. I am in the lecture Tuesdays, Thursdays, whatever. And then we can talk about anything that you need to review. Now, in particular, now a lot of assignments are graded. Now you can review your grades on Canvas. If you have any question regarding grades, remember, we talked about this the first day. Any question about grades, please, your first point of contact is the TA. Talk with the TA. If you send the email to me, I am going to forward the email to the TA. 2 steps. You can directly go to the TA and talk about grades. Now, something that is increasing, at least in the former days, an increasing number of students is contacting me regarding medical things, medical conditions. So hopefully not, but if by any chance you have a medical condition and you need extra time for something, the assignment or whatever, remember, medical conditions are okay. We can provide accommodation for that, ASU policies. The only thing that I ask you is, if you send me an email, you have a medical condition, please, obviously your name, who you are, the class, the section, and usually if you have some medical thing, there is some kind of document that health services provide you. Just include that in your email, and then we can talk about your accommodations. And obviously, if you're going to be talking about grades or about medical things, very, very important, use your ASU email. Again, email from Hotmail, Yahoo, whatever, medical condition, or explain me my grades. I cannot talk about your grades or your situation to an account that is, I don't know if it's you or not. So use your email, please. Good? Fine? Okay.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
For the exam, are there going to be any questions like where we have to write our work on a paper and then scan it, or is it just like multiple choice, fill in the blank, things like that?
Good question. Question in the exam. I am going to show you examples at the end, but in order to answer the question, very important. Number one, 2 types of questions. One, multiple choice. You have the question, you have some options, you check one or more. Number 2, open box, open question. You have the question and you have one space in which you can type something with the keyboard. There is no question in which you need to, for instance, do something on paper, take a picture and upload that. There are no questions like that in the exam. Multiple choice or open, writing something. And that something usually is going to be source code. You're going to write some lines of Java thing. That's it. Good?
Yeah, good. Okay.
One important thing, and well, I am going to talk about the lockdown browser, but one important thing is the software is not going to allow you to open any other software. Excuse me. So with the software that we're using, the only thing that you can have in your screen is the browser with the questions for the exam. So I cannot ask you to use, for instance, a software to draw a diagram, any software. And so far for this exam, I am not going to ask you to do things on paper and upload. So you do not need the phone, please. One of the things that you're going to do is to check your environment. Be sure that your phone is not over your desk. You cannot use anything, iPhone things. The idea is that you cannot be talking. Very, very important, guys. I noticed this. A lot of people, when it's doing the exam, is talking aloud, maybe talking with yourselves, like reading the question and so on. And all of that is recorded in the system. And what happens is when you are talking, the system do not know that you're talking with yourselves, whatever, and it's going to flag your exam like suspicious because for the system, you are talking with someone else, and then someone is going to review the video and you're going to be notified that your exam is suspicious. Please, if possible, quiet. I mean, obviously no one in the room, but even if you're alone, do not talk for 1 hour. Yeah, there are going to be questions in which I am going to ask you to code something. For instance, I am going to show you, but question in your exam, I can give you a diagram, particularly a class diagram, and one of the questions could be open. Give me the source code that represents that diagram. one of the things that you review with the diagrams, in particular with the class diagrams, was the connections. If you remember, association, composition, aggregation. One question in your exam for sure is going to be, well, I have two classes here. There is a relationship between them. Is association, is composition. Give me the subscope. If you have any question regarding the exam, like regarding the topics, send me an email. I mean, I think that is the easy way. You can send me an email. If you can include your question, what I usually do is to reply with the answer. If it's something complicated, if we need to meet or whatever, we can talk about office hours, a particular time to have a Zoom meeting. Good. During the exam, you cannot do that during the exam. I mean, the problem during the exam is you start your exam and you finish your exam without communication with me or with the TAs, no communication. So during the exam is you cannot interrupt the exam to talk with me. Do not do that. Read the question, put your answer, the best thing that you can do. If the question is open, you can add some kind of note, comment, whatever. But if the question is multiple choice, select the option and that's it. If you have a problem during the exam, well, I am assuming that if the problem is that you cannot connect or the problem is that you get out of the exam or something, I think in that moment you will need to contact me or contact the TA so we can review the situation, and if that is needed, we need to restart the exam for you because you can only take the exam one time. So if you start the exam right now and 1 minute later you disconnect for any reason, the system is going to think that you submit your exam in 1 minute and you cannot take the exam again. So in that situation, you are out of the lockdown browser. You need to contact me. You need to contact the TA. I am going to ask the TA to be available during 9 to 10:30. I am going to be available, again, not in Zoom, but in the email. So what you need to do is to quickly contact us and we can review what happened. Guys, everything is recorded. And I am sure that you know this. For instance, right now, I am reading the chat. Every single thing that you write in the chat is recorded in a file and it's in the cloud. From the good morning to whatever you put there, anything with your name and who replied, whatever. In the exam, it's the same. If you open the exam and you review one question and you look to the question 1 minute and move to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and you basically review all the questions and then suddenly disconnect, we know that you review the questions. And the questions are selected randomly from a pool. The system is not going to select the same question the second time that you take the exam, unless, well, it's a very, very particular and special question. So again, you're being recorded, every action, everything that you do online with the exams and with anything else, create a record. So behave. Good. But again, anything that you need during the exam, contact me, but you cannot contact me if you're running the lockdown browser because you're going to be flagged like academic integrity. Good. Okay, talking about the lockdown browser, I think you should be familiar with this because this was the tool that most of your classes use during the spring. So my assumption is when I mention lockdown browser, all of you have used this at least in one class before, but just in case, the software, what you are going to have on Canvas right now is a link like this. You're going to have something like this in our weekly schedule. If you go to modules, you're going to have one row like this, not exactly like that, but something like that. And if you click there, you can check the lockdown browser with this sample exam that, as I mentioned, is one question. The day of your exam, in 1 week, what you're going to have is a link like this. Notice all this that is telling you that you need the lockdown browser, right? So the sample exam that you can use right now, the midterm, similar format, you need to go to Canvas. In Canvas, you have the link. The first time that you click the link, what is going to happen is clicking here is going to give you a screen like this. Why? Because I am sure that you are using Chrome or Safari or whatever browser you have. The computer, the system is going to notice that. And when you click in a link that need the lockdown browser, the software for the proctoring, is going to give you this link. What you need to do is click there. You are going to download the software. You need to install the software in your computers. That is the lockdown browser. So my request for you, as soon as you can, today, tomorrow, during the week, click here in the sample exam and install the software, the proctoring software, because you are going to need that software the next week in order to do your exam. Good? I am going to talk about what do you need to study in the next slides. Yes. Good? So you install the software. And when you install the software, now what is going to happen is that using the software, you are going to take the exam. Now, the software is just like that. It's a browser. The only thing is, it's a browser that do not allow you to open multiple tabs, do not allow you to navigate through the internet. It's basically going to open one page, and that page is going to be your exam on Canvas. And additionally, to allow you to take the exam on Canvas, the software is going to, number one, ask you to close everything. It's not going to allow you to have any other software running. It's going to ask you for the camera, and it's going to follow these things to check before opening the exam for you. Check that you have a camera. If yes, it's going to ask you to show an ID. Please have an ID with you the day of the exam, just like if you were to take the exam in person. You can use any ID. I mean, your driver license is okay. Your ASU ID is okay. One recommendation that I usually give you, if you are going to use your ASU ID, the one that is this bank account, right? If you're going to use that, please, I will recommend you cover the numbers of your bank thing. The only thing that I need is an ID with your picture and your name. Any other thing you can cover with your finger, put something, whatever. I mean, again, everything is recorded. You do not want a picture of your bank card stored in some place on the cloud. So it is okay to cover the numbers of your bank account. We do not need that. Use your picture, your face, your name. That's it. Yeah, you can use your password, driver license, any official identification that have picture and your full name. So I think the driver license, the password, obviously the SUID. Again, for the ones that have the bank account, my recommendation, cover that. I do not need that, we do not need that, and you do not want your accounts in some place in the cloud. Okay, good. So after you show the ID, the browser is going to take a picture of you. So we're going to have both pictures, the one in your ID, the one that is you working. And from that point, the camera is going to be open. So the camera is going to record you all the time. Please, all the exam is going to be on the screen. So again, if by any reason you are down for a long period of time or talking with someone there, your exam is going to be flagged like suspicious. And maybe we're going to talk with you and things like that. If you can avoid that, if you can just be like this, will be great. But well, think about it. You're being recorded. And I think some people forget that is the camera is watching you. Anything that you say or anything that you do is recorded. Be careful what you say. So the last thing, the environment. The software is going to ask you to check your environment. You're going to need to move the camera, your laptop or the camera external that you're using, to show your desktop and the room. Please show everything. I mean, be sure that you scan all your space and particularly the desktop. Because again, if for some reason you do not show the full desktop, your exam is going to be flagged as suspicious. You do not want that. So full scan, the instructions are going to be provided. The computer is going to tell you what to do, but follow everything. And again, do not forget to remove whatever you have here. No communication things, no cell phones, no calculators, no electronic devices near to you. And if possible, a space in which you are not talking with someone else or there is no someone else that suddenly appear in the video. Okay, so closed book, no notes, you can use paper, that is fine. Showing your environment, very, very important. And that's it. Test your system with the sample exam, just to be sure that everything is going to be correct. I really do not want to receive a bunch of emails next week, 9 a.m. My computer didn't work with the exam because I do not have a camera. So please review that. Okay, so moving forward with the content. Things that are going to be in your exam, for sure, the topics. A lot of questions, multiple choice, concepts. What is software engineering? What is a requirement? What is a functional requirement? I mean, any definition, concept, or whatever that we reviewed during the past lectures can be there. True or false, the next statement. The next line is a functional requirement, yes or no, talking about things that we reviewed before. Concepts, most of them, multiple choice. So I am not asking you to memorize anything. Usually these kind of questions are going to be like, select the correct one. Now, in particular, I talked about this in the previous lecture. What is a non-functional requirement? That is something that could be open. And it's open, you do not need to write a full page with the answer. It's just what is a non-functional requirement. And if you mention the keywords for the definition, you're going to define. Anything that is open and you need more than 2 or 3 lines, something is wrong. Well, unless it's source code. For the source code, you're going to need more than 3 lines. But anything that is theoretical, anything that is a concept, is going to be short. 1 or 2 lines, 3 lines maybe, but in 2 you can be good. Concepts, process models. Talking about process models, classical question. You know what? I have a project. My project is a long project, big project for a bank. You are going to have a history there, but it's long, and we are signing a contract, and the contract is specified, blah blah blah, a story. Key ideas: it's long, need a contract. Which process model did you use? And well, you have a lot that we review that are plan-based, and you have the agile option. Multiple choice, there are going to be there, waterfall, agile, B-model, spiral, and so on. You tell me which one apply to that particular question. It's a good definition, but some people is going to disagree with you. Anyway, yeah, so if you review the slides and you review like pros, cons, when to use, all that material could be questions for your exam. You want to read the chapters in the book, it's fine, chapter 2, chapter 3, go ahead. But if you understand everything that is on the slides, if you watch the videos, you can make it for the exam. Now, with the Agile in particular, we use one full lecture with the Agile. So remember, what is a sprint? product backlog, sprint backlog, the different roles of the people, the burden chart. If all those concepts make sense, we're moving forward. Which is the difference between the B model and the spiral? What is a risk? Is the same a risk that a bug? True, false? That kind of questions you can answer in less than a minute, but it's more about understanding than memorization. It's the same the risk than the bug, and hopefully you agree with me. No, two different things. It's the same B model than the spiral. No, two different things. I have a mission critical system. Which process model do I use? Mission critical. There is one answer on the slides, on the book. You answer. Now, I think those are going to be the easy ones. Multiple choice, open for a short definition, no problem. Diagrams. If I could advise you to review something, that something could be the diagrams. A lot of questions are going to involve diagrams. Is the 50% of the things that you have been done in the previous weeks. I mean, in the lecture, we have reviewed several things, diagrams in the previous lecture, but you have been working with diagrams in your homeworks for weeks. So diagrams, I need you obviously to be able to do or explain the use case diagram, for sure, the activity diagram, the state machine diagram, the class diagram. Notice that I am not including the sequence diagram that is your homework this week. So you have homework, your homework is sequence diagrams. I am not including sequence diagram in the exam, just in case you want to review the others, complete the homework. But if you're submitting the homework Wednesday, there is not enough time for you to ask questions. So no sequence diagrams in the exam, but these are going to be there. Particularly, obviously, anything about the diagrams can be there. Any of the problems that you solve as exercises, any of them can be one question in your exam now. Something that I could recommend you particularly to review, and I am going to mention in the next slides, is if we talk about the use case diagrams, well, obviously here I am missing user stories, right? Like specification of requirement with user stories. But moving to the diagrams, two important things with the use case, not the only ones, use important things, maybe the most complicated ones, the relationship with include and extends. Again, there are several topics here, several things. What is an actor? What is a use case? What is the relationship between a use case as an actor, whatever. But two things that I would recommend you to review particularly, the include and the extend. And I am going to mention them in a few slides later. Also, something that I particularly recommend you to review if we talk about class diagrams. Making a class is kind of easy. You have been doing classes since CS110. And this box with the name and the name of the methods and the variables is trivial. However, the important thing, or usually the complicated part, is the relationships. What is the diamond? Inheritance, the diamond, or use the arrow. And if I have the diamond, the black or the white, composition, aggregation, inheritance, association. I need you to identify the difference between them. What is the meaning of connecting a class A with a class B with them? In the meaning, but also the difference in the source code. What is the source code if I connect A and B using inheritance? Well, class A extends B, direct. Okay, I need exactly the same if I use the black diamond, the white diamond, or the simple arrow. And the arrow that have an arrowhead, what happens if pointing up or pointing down, all those differences. This and this in the diagrams is something that I highly recommend you to review. Good. Okay. You can have these ones and these ones with the arrow, without the arrow. They are bidirectionals or they have a particular direction. But well, I am going to show you examples. These are the things that could be the most important for you to review. Obviously, requirements, as I mentioned before, the functional, the non-functional. We covered that topic in particular. What is a requirement? What is a necessity? This was the previous lecture and something that we're going to do today. This is the big picture of your exam, period. Good? Okay, things that we need to review. I am going to show you some things about these topics quickly, and at the end, some examples of the questions. Talking about requirements, question in your exam for sure, difference between necessity and requirement. Can you help me to remember what is the difference between those two? Necessity and requirement, two key ideas.
A requirement is something that you can actually measure.
Yes, and specific, okay, with the chat. Two important ideas, guys. Number one, this thing here, I use the word atomic. I use the word clear. I use now specific. This thing here should be short, clear, unambiguous, specific. There are a lot of words that you can mention, but they basically refer to the same. One thing. Second thing, what you mentioned, it should be something that you can measure or test or validate. Something that is clear is here or is not here. And we talked about that in the previous lecture, like fast is not clear. Fast, for me, 1 second. For you, 1 millisecond. Fast is an ambiguous concept. Oh, it should run in less than 1 second. Okay, we can understand that. It can be measured. Well, we can run the system and we can put the timer and it's more or less than 1 second. Measure. Anyway, requirements, functional and non-functionals. I shared with you the slides of the previous lecture. Hopefully you have time to review all the different examples and hopefully there are no questions about, okay, these are non-functionals, these are functionals. The diagram that I give you regarding, okay, the non-functionals are basically qualities and constraints, and these are all the categories of qualities, and these are all the categories of constraints. Could be useful for you to remember that. Again, I am not expecting you to memorize the diagram, but I need to be sure that if I mention speed, speed is a quality. Why? Because it's about performance, right? Usability is a quality. Using Java as a programming language is a constraint. Oh, so using Java as a programming language in your project is a requirement, yes or no? Question in your exam. Using Java as a programming language in your project, in your final project, is a requirement, yes, no? Yes. Okay, is a functional requirement, yes or no? Think for your exam, guys. Please read very carefully the question. You're going to have at least 3 minutes per question. I mean, if you split your time in the number of questions, at least you have 3 minutes. Read carefully. You can have the question if using Java is a requirement. You like that. Someone else, the question can be, is a non-functional requirement? And someone else could be, is a functional requirement? And for the first two, it's true. For the last one, it's false. Using Java is a functional requirement, and you should say no. But it's a requirement, yes. It's a non-functional, yes. But functional, no. Read carefully. Anyway, important, user stories. You can use user stories as I want to document, requirements in general. Requirements, functional and non-functional. User stories is fine. Diagrams, the UML diagrams, use cases. Can I use a use case to document non-functional requirements? And hopefully we agree, no. Only functionals. Now, talking about them, for them, you have a requirements, you talk with the customer. When you talk with the customer, in some point, you need to decide if you're going to use user stories or diagrams, whatever. What you collect here are the necessities. We agree on this. Any necessity can be transformed to a requirement. Any necessity can become a requirement. The only thing that you need to do is to reformulate the necessity from I want this to be fast to I want this to run in less than 1 second. Necessities can become requirements, but you need to make them clear and you need to put something there that helps you to measure. That is a process. When you have the requirement, the last thing that you do is put that requirement on paper, in a piece of paper, like a user story, or in a diagram. That is the last thing that you do. Now, after that, what happened is you can use, in order to specify requirement, that is the name that we use, one, natural language. Natural language, you can document your requirements in English. It's not a good idea. It's too open. You can document your requirements using mathematical equations. Well, that is very useful and very clear, but imagine documenting Canvas or the Pac-Man or a video game only with mathematical equations. It's not possible. We need more than use mathematical equations. So the last two options, we can use a graphical notation. Graphical notation is a fancy name for a diagram. We use UML diagrams to document requirements. Which UML diagram we use to document requirements? Question in your exam. And hopefully it's use case diagrams. What about activity and state? Activity and state complement the use case diagram, right? Now, another thing that we can use is structural language. Structural language is the fancy name for templates. And the common template that you use, something that you review, the template for user stories. The template for user stories as a something, I want something because something. Structural language, templates, user stories, diagrams, UML, all the things that you review. And well, mathematical specification, usually you need more. Natural language, put your requirements in English. Well, it's happened for a contract, but it's not usually the best thing to do, not for the software developing process. Now, talking deep regarding the diagrams. As I mentioned before, for your exam, the relationships, something that I need to be sure that we agree. Number one, actors. What is an actor? In a use case diagram, what is an actor? Someone that is interact with the system, yes. Let's think about the Pac-Man video game. How many actors, if you are developing a video game like Pac-Man? Okay. Yeah. 2, good. Guys, an actor is a user that interact with the system. I agree with you on that. The user is an actor. If we're talking about a video game, yeah, the player is one of the actors. That is correct. But also, an actor is a system or a subsystem that is involved. For instance, if we talk about the Pac-Man video game, or in general, any video game, there are 2 actors. Actor number 1 is the player, the one that is controlling the yellow circle. Actor number 2, you can use the name system, or you can use the name the ghost, or the enemy, or whatever, the artificial intelligence controlling whatever is happening. You have 2 actors. The important thing is actors can be people, but also other software systems. And that is important. Yeah. Actors. Just remember that. A person, yes. A subsystem also. Now, you can use inheritance between actors. Inheritance is a relationship that you can have between these little guys representing actors. You can have, for instance, a TA, a professor, and you can have a common parent here, I don't know, university staff, and then you can put a requirement that is connected with the staff, and the interpretation for that is, well, this, whatever it is something that a professor can do and a TA can also do, because any of them is a staff. It's like when you put a variable in a parent class, that variable is in both childs, or the childs can access that. In this case, that apply with inheritance and the use cases. Inheritance can be used between actors. Now, also, you can have inheritance between requirements. You can have a parent requirement and you can have child's requirements. You can use inheritance with the ovals, the requirements, and you can use inheritance with the actors. Those two things are good. Now, can we use inheritance between a use case as an actor, or can we use inheritance between an actor as a parent for a use case? Can we connect those two elements using this arrow with the triangle head? No. Inheritance with actor, yes. Inheritance with use cases, yes. Never connect them with the inheritance line. Never connect them using the line with the triangle. Check that for your exam. I am going to share with you examples so you're going to have the opportunity to review some slides with examples, but this is the key idea that I want to share regarding inheritance. Now, next, if you have an actor and you have a use case, the only connection possible between them is the line. The actor need that requirement. The actor interact with that requirement. Period. There is nothing else. Talking about include and extend. Include and extend happen only between requirements. You have two requirements and you can connect them with a single line that you already know, or you can put include or extend between them. I want to be sure that we understand the difference between include and extend. So this is an example of a simple diagram, some actors, connections, your requirements. Usually you call primary actors, this one, secondary actors, the one to the right, not mandatory, use usual notation. In this case, example from the book, all of them primary actors. Include and extend. I need you to remember the following. When you are using include, you have something that is big, and there is an arrow that go from the big thing, call it the base, and it's going to point to something small. The base is the big thing, and the addition is something small, and the include mean that we want that thing, the small one, inside of the big one. So if I have something like this big thing and this big thing have these three elements inside, what I have is relationships from include like this. So the big one, the one that have things inside, is going to have arrows going out, pointing to these small things. And the small things are inside. That is the meaning of including. And the classical example when you review programming is this including is related, or is going to be related with aggregation and composition, with this class that is an aggregation or a composition of others. For the use cases, we cannot talk yet about that because these are not variables. But the idea here with requirements is inclusion. Makes sense. The big one is the base. The arrow point to the small ones. The small ones are inside. Now, this is one thing. Example. If I have a checkout process, I go to the store and I am going to do my checkout. If I tell you that I have these 3 elements here, scan the item, calculate the total, do the payment. When I put this checkout connected in this way, the reading of the diagram is checkout is the big thing because it's the one that the arrows are going out. And these ones are the small things. And what I need to read here is that the 3 small things are inside of the checkout. The checkout is a collection of those 3 small things. Moreover, the 3 are mandatory. The 3 should be inside of checkout in order to checkout to be checkout. When you use include, you are telling that something is mandatory, should be there. Good? Now, extension. I need you to remember this big difference. Extension. In extension, you have something that is maybe big. Something. And the arrow is now pointing to the opposite. It's not going out, it's going in. Moreover, it's going in and it comes from another requirement that usually is the same as the previous one. You notice I draw 2 boxes, kind of the same. But the second one, the one that is pointing to the first one, have something extra, and something extra that is kind of irrelevant, optional, a flower there. It's the same requirement. It's kind of similar thing. This is big, but the one that have the arrow and is pointing to the other, the one that we call the extension, have something extra. And that something extra is kind of small and irrelevant. And if some point my project go out of time, if in some point I need to cancel requirements, the first requirement that I am going to cancel, the first thing that I am not going to do in the final project are these requirements that are extensions of something, because they are the flowers for the system. They are the lowest priority for the customer. Examples here is like, I have this bank transaction. The bank transaction include authentication. That means authentication is an element of the bank transaction. It's mandatory. Every time that I do a transaction with the bank, it's mandatory that I authenticate. Authentication is small. It's not as big as the transaction. It's just one step, but it's mandatory. Now, on the opposite, this is a big thing. This one is using extension. That one is going to be the same that this one. So this authentication is here, therefore it's going to be also here. But because this one is an extension of this one is going to be the same, but with the flower. In this case, the flower is, okay, the bank transaction, but with get help. Okay, this guy is the help screens. If you are in the ATM, one thing is all the process that the ATM do in order to do the transaction, ask you for authentication, the amount of money that you want, give you the money and so on. And well, you can do exactly the same process, but having elements that guide you to the process, or this small icon with help that you can click, the element with the flower, the extra thing, screens with some text that are the helping messages. That is the big difference between include and extend. And well, here I have inheritance and question your exam. Withdraw and deposit, they do authentication, yes or no? Okay, yes. How do you know? Because the parent have authentication. If the parent have authentication, the childs are going to inherit that. And yes, I agree with the definition in the chat. Moreover, I want to give you this table for the book. Usually, if I give you two requirements, or if you have two requirements and you need to connect them and you need to use one or the other, include or extend, the questions that you need to ask to yourselves is like, okay, you have the A and the B, and I am asking you to connect A with B. Any of them is optional. I am here with something that can be not mandatory, like the helping messages. You can be thinking like, always are the help messages not mandatory? I don't know, depend on the customer, depending on the context of the system. Obviously in the exam, you're going to have that context. I am going to mention the helping is mandatory or the help messages are not mandatory. With that information, you can decide, okay, A and B, one of them is optional. If one of them is optional, if you use yes as an answer, that is a suggestion to use extend. If your answer is no, both are mandatory, like authentication is mandatory, and therefore I want to connect authentication with withdraw or authentication with transaction, cannot be optional. Use include. The base is complete without the other. If you tell me like no, like transaction is not complete without authentication, is this a small part that should be inside? If it's not complete, you need include. It's complete. The only thing that I am doing is adding the flower. Extend. Something is conditional or something changed the behavior. Again, different ways to ask the same. If your answer is no, if something is, this is not conditional, this is mandatory, it should happen. Mandatory, optional, conditional, extra, flower versus components. That is the difference between these two. In the exam, at least 2 or 3 questions related with this. Be sure to review this. Now, almost done. I am giving you examples. You can review this. You can check what is happening. Inheritance with actors, inheritance with use cases. You be sure that you understand there are comments in the diagrams. In any UML diagram, that is a comment, dotted line with the posit. Comments, you can ignore that in my examples. The box, usually to represent system, nothing new. Connections, multiple actors, connections, include and extends. You can review if these examples are following the rules that I described before. More. This one, highly recommended. Think about this. Is a tricky example. Take a look, check what I am doing there, please. Moving forward for the midterm. Whatever I mentioned is not the full content of your exam. The full content of your exam, lecture 1 to 5. So these are just examples of the things that I consider are the most important. Good. So class diagrams. is the second diagram that I recommend you to review very, very careful. In particular, I am pretty sure that you can tell me the modifiers that you can use in a class diagram. Tell me what I do in a class diagram in order to put something private. What I do in a class diagram in order to put something public. Yes. Before the name of the variable, before the name of the method, those symbols represent public or private. Great. Now, you can tell me where the attributes go, global variables, and you can tell me where the method, the functions go. I think that is easy. The hardest part is this one. Now, for that one, I need your help. This one. What is the meaning of this particular connection between between this class and this interface? Moreover, if I ask you in the exam, can you please give me the source code for this one? I want the class goes, and I want that to fulfill the relationship ghost runnable. What is the source code equivalent to this thing here, realization? Easy, public, class, ghost, implements, runnable. Good. Keyword, implements. The keyword implement is the meaning of that arrow. Good. What about this one? What is the relationship between team0 and jpanel? I could ask you, give me the source code equivalent to that small diagram. Extends, thank you. Extends, implements, good. Now, these ones, the diamonds, composition, aggregation. Tell me, what is the source code equivalent to composition and aggregation? What do we put in the source code, for instance, here, library? In order to show the relationship with the diamond with book. The same that we use with include. Yes, that relationship is, these two represent global variables. These two represent attributes. What I have is the class with the diamond is the one that have inside a variable, an attribute, global variable from this class. That is aggregation composition. Now, both are going to be the same, an attribute, a global variable. Now, we need to identify between the black diamond, composition, or the white diamond, aggregation. What is the difference in the source code between composition, black diamond, and aggregation, white diamond? The opposite. Composition is mandatory. I need this element to exist. Aggregation is I can exist without the component. And with that definition, sorry, you just give me the answer. If I can have this variable here, and if I am okay with the variable being null in some point, what I have is aggregation, because I am going to aggregate the element. And if I am going to aggregate the element, it's because that element was empty in some point, was null. However, if the element is mandatory, if the element should be there, like the engine in a car, remember, that element cannot be null. And if the element cannot be null, then what I have is composition. Now, in the source code, what can I do in order to be sure that book is never null? That book, that B, is always there inside of library. Something simple. Library. Can we agree that that one is the constructor? If you have a constructor and inside of the constructor you do the new book, if you put the new inside of the constructor of library, can you create an object library without at the same time creating that book? And the answer is no, because when you create the library, you are going to run the constructor for the library. And when you run the constructor for the library, in the constructor, you are creating the book. Always, 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 the library is going to exist with the book. And it's not going to be null, never. When I have something like this, I have this black diamond, a connection between library and book in which book always exists. Book is mandatory. Book is a component of library, a composition between library and book. What happens if I do not put the constructor? Or what happens if I have the constructor, but I do not have this new there? I can have other things, but not the new for book. I have aggregation. I have a variable. In the constructor, I am not giving a value. So that B is null. And maybe in some point, I am going to put something there, but it's null at the beginning. It's going to be an aggregation. In some point, I am going to add a book to the library. White diamond, black diamond. So hopefully this helps you during your exam. This is the key. Now, the tricky part. What happens if I have the class library? What happens if I have a book here? What happens if I have a constructor? And that constructor receives as a parameter a book. And that constructor make B equal X. That is something that you do with the constructor, right? Question in your exam, that one. This is an example of composition or aggregation. That one is black diamond or white diamond. B. And the question is always, why B? Well, because it's dependency injection. Official definition, that is dependency injection. Dependency injection is with the white diamond, but the real thing, only because one thing, you can create a library and you can pass here as a parameter null. And if you pass as a parameter null, think about it, if you are receiving a parameter, you cannot be sure that that parameter is going to be something. The parameter can be always be null when you are working with objects. The representation of that, this one, not the other. Unless you are sure that the element is going to be created, that the element is not going to be null, that the element is going to be present, you cannot use this one. You can add that one and then the scenario change. But I think now you get the idea. If you are sure, if your source code guarantee that the element is going to have a value, we can talk about the black diamond. If not, white diamond. So that is important for your exam. Review that. Other than that, I am giving you in the slides questions like the ones that you're going to have in your exam. As I mentioned before, definitions. What is software design? And I told you before, process models, multiple choice, about diagrams, relationships used with multiple choice, activity diagrams, elements, multiple choice, and this one is very similar to the one that I showed you with source code, multiple choice. I am not showing you any question that is open, but as I mentioned at the beginning, your exam, multiple choice like these ones, but also some open question. Most of them multiple choice. That is the reason because I show you these examples, but be prepared to write something. And that's it. Any question? The exam, 1 hour, but you have 1 hour and the 15 minutes, so you can enter to the lockdown browser and so on. Is during the lecture. The number of questions, it depends, because there are questions that are a little bit more complicated, like this one. So for some of you, it's going to be one number. For others, it's going to be another number. The question comes from a pool of questions, and from the pool, some of you are going to have like 2 easy or 1 hard, 1 question with multiple answer, or 2 questions true, false. So the number can change a little bit. Not really. The grade is going to be like, you know, every question, when the question appears, I didn't show you that, but it's going to have a bar here, and here is how many points that question is. So at the end, all your questions, if you review the numbers here, the number at 100. So you know over 100 how many points that question is. So you can decide whether or not you want to use a lot of time or not for that question. Realization is the inheritance from an interface. That is the name. Generalization or specialization is the inheritance from class to class. Good. Okay, guys, I need to go. Next week, your exam. See you in 2 weeks. Thank you.